Hello everyone and welcome back to Ushanka Show. Stories about life in the Soviet Union. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи! В эфире программа Ushanka Show. Today's date is January 1st, 2023, so this is my very first video of the new year 2023. С Новым годом, дорогие товарищи! As some of you may be still recovering from the excessive alcohol consumption last night, I decided maybe it's a good topic to talk about drinking in the Soviet Union. As I was saying goodbye to 2022, what a horrible year it was, we also need to say goodbye to Stalichna vodka. Goodbye, Stalichna. And hello there, Stali Vodka. So rebranding was done recently and this new design of bottles just showed up on the shelves in the United States. At least I saw a couple here in Michigan. So we're not gonna have Stalichna anymore, it's gonna be called simply Stoli. Not sure how many of you guys are aware that Stalichna vodka is not Russian vodka anymore since probably 91. Some Russian oligarch managed to purchase the rights for the brand Stalichna and moved production to one of the Baltic states, I believe, to Latvia. So it's not really Russian vodka anymore, and if you look carefully on the bottle of Stalichna or Stoli, it doesn't say anywhere that's Russian vodka. Old bottles used to have that. Okay, now let's talk about drinking in the Soviet Union, especially during the Brezhnev era, the time when I was a kid. The situation with alcohol consumption in the Soviet Union got really out of hand by the end of 1980s. As you can see at this graph, so it's measured in liters of absolute alcohol, so 100% alcohol. So if we later look in the bottles of vodka, which is 40%, this is 100% alcohol. From 1960, it was 3.2 liter for every person in the Soviet Union, and it steadily climbed all the way to 10.8 liters per person. Women, children, infants, everyone consuming almost 11 liters of absolute alcohol by 1980. And by the way, that's the great question to ask anyone who thinking the life in the Soviet Union was just a worker's paradise. If life was so good, why people were drinking so hard? So let's look again at the numbers. So in 1981, every person in the Soviet Union, it's 265 million people, consumed 10.6 liters of pure alcohol. It equals 53 bottles of vodka per year for every citizen of the Soviet Union, or 118 bottles of dry wine. And I need to remind you, that's the official statistics. This is what government produced and population consumed, so it doesn't include any moonshining, which was probably close to 20, maybe up to 30% of alcohol consumption. And then of course some people were so desperate they were drinking anything that contained alcohol, any surrogates, aftershaves, whatever. And of course we all understand that not everyone was drinking. Of course children didn't drink, women didn't drink that much, some men didn't drink or drank just a little bit. So what it means that by 1984, 80% of adult males were consuming 200 bottles of vodka per year, or pretty much every 2 days, one bottle. So 200 bottles of vodka per year, 80% of adult males took care of that. And I don't think I need to remind you what does alcohol do to the human life and the human society. In America, it says on the back of every bottle of alcohol what kind of problems it creates. And in Soviet Union, alcohol-related deaths were about almost 500,000 per year, 486,000 to be exact. And it's poisoning, suicides, domestic violence, killing. So like on the domestic violence and killing, 24% of all the killings that happen where people did it being drunk. And I believe the situation could be even way worse if the cars were available and affordable in the Soviet Union. Since not many people owned cars, we didn't have that much of alcohol-related car accidents. Still had plenty, but not even close, because it's like 1 in 30 families own a car. So, and the cars were so expensive and precious. So we didn't have a lot of problems with drunk driving. Still had plenty people who did driving for living, like truck drivers or tractor drivers in the collective farms. But generally, it wasn't as bad just because not many people own cars. And here's the example I remember from my time I stayed in the village. So those two tractor drivers, they were packing silo for the winter. So they were cutting green corn and stacking them up and packing with the tractor with the big rubber tires. And being drunk, they got into argument. What is the pressure each tire applies? So one guy bet another guy that he can lay on the top of the corn and and another guy can drive a tractor right over him, and it will be no damage because tires so big, there'll be hardly any pressure. And guess what? He lost and he got killed. And the Soviet government was quite in an interesting position because, first of all, government held the monopoly of manufacturing alcohol and selling alcohol. So they were making a lot of money being a monopoly. I believe like up to 15% of the budget, there was money coming from selling alcohol to population. So that was a good cash cow. But on the other hand, productivity suffered, quality suffered, deaths, medical service, all that was biting Soviet government in the ass. So they had this interesting balance. How can we still make money by selling vodka to the people, but somehow make people do a quality job? And you also need to remember that in the Soviet Union, people didn't consume alcohol the way they consume here in the West, which like on a Friday night, you get paid, you stop at the bar and you spend time with your buddies, or on the weekend, you visit a bar. We didn't really have a lot of bars. People usually consume vodka right on the streets or at the place of work, like my dad did. And the end of the day, they just showered. Then someone pulls out the bottle of vodka. They take care of that bottle. Then they, walk home. And that was pretty much everyday scene. In the evening, you see these workers, blue-collar workers. They literally like zombies. They will slowly walk home, kind of shaking, some of them falling on the ground, some fall asleep on the bench or right on the grass, and they just struggle get home. My father was successful making it home every evening, but when he gets home, he will be just going on the couch and taking a nap for a couple of hours, then he can move around. So he wasn't anything like aggressive drunk, but some families suffered. Some people, when they get drunk, they get really aggressive, try to fight. So there was a lot of domestic violence. So we were lucky in that case. It got really bad only one time. So all I remember as a kid, it was during a New Year celebration. My dad had too much. So he had started getting like hallucinations. We call белая горячка, so like white fever. So he started seeing things and he ended up locking himself in the bathroom, and he actually tried to drown himself in the tub. He, as I said, locked the door and started filling the tub with water. We ended up breaking into that door and drank him out. So that was the worst kind of experience I remember with my father being just too much drunk. So I can easily say that vodka stole my father from me, because in Kiev, I really didn't spend much time with him, because during the weekdays, he comes home drunk and he just takes a nap, then he watches some sports on TV, and goes to bed, wakes up in the morning, goes back to work. And of course, I have my school days. Only out in the village in the summer when he was away from his buddies, then we will go mushroom hunting together, fishing together. He taught me how to start fires with a single match. So like I have these two lives with my father, one in Kiev when he didn't exist, and then one out in the village when he was my father. And also, on a positive note, my father never took money from our budget to buy vodka. He always gave all his pay to my mom. My mom was running the budget in the family. But whatever side business, whatever haltura he was doing, maybe stealing some paint and reselling it, or painting the cars or other items for people, he'll use that money, or people just give him a bottle of vodka for services. So that was his fund to get drunk. So at least he didn't steal from the family. And of course, he'll bring the bottle of vodka and hide it somewhere at home so he can go through the weekend. And there'll be this kind of almost like sports hide-and-seek game that my mom will try to guess and find that bottle and then dilute it to make it less strong. And of course, then my dad tried to find a better spot to hide. So that was going on for years. Of course, I wasn't aware of it. In the end of this video, I'll show you the vintage movie reel from 1930 that shows so-called вытрезвитель. So that's the medical facility that treats drunk people. So let's talk about Vytrizvitel. So Vytrizvitel, it could be translated like the place where you sober up, so sober upper. There was a medical facility, and it was not for free. You had to pay for those services. So that's where they would collect all the drunks, people who were laying on the streets, they couldn't make home, and they'll spend their night or more under supervision by medical staff, and they will get charged for that. So you'll see this, like in this case, it's a windowless truck will be cruising around town. Sometimes they will answer the phone call, so citizens will say, hey, there's a guy laying on the corner of such and such street, and then this truck will arrive. It's called Spetsmedsluzhba, so it's a special medical service, and they will pick up the guy and place him into this truck. In this case, on this picture, you could tell the guy is fighting. He doesn't want to get in there. And then we'll deliver him to Vytrizvitel. Or like this photo, once again, 2 militia members. As you remember, we called our police militia. They're helping another drunk to get in this windowless van before he's being delivered to Vytrizvitel. And this photo, guys being delivered. So you could see some of them drunk, but they still can walk. And some will be so drunk that they had to be carried. Upon arrival into Vytrizvitel, most guys will be searched. Quite often they'll be stripped naked, especially if they already soiled themselves, forced to take cold shower, and then placed in the rooms with the twin-size beds when they're gonna try to recover. Looking at these photos, I can only imagine what a nightmare would be to work in such place when daily you got these drunk, wasted people, some of them fighting back, trying to bite you, trying to punch you. Some of them just so drunk that, you know, they piss themselves, and you have to undress them, make them take a shower, try to make sense what their names are, addresses, phone numbers, and it's day after day, work weeks, weekends, every day. Most of the alcoholics were men, but I don't know, maybe 10-15% were women, so they also were treated in such facilities, but of course they had separate rooms for them. As I mentioned earlier, Vytrizvitel services weren't free. So for example, there's a warning paper, предупреждение, to someone named Latyshev Vladimir Vasilievich, dated June 7, 1972. I was 1 year old back then. So it says, hey, on May 6, 1971, you were delivered in drunk condition to Vytrizvitel number 17 at the address Moscow, Petrovka 32, and you still owe us 15 rubles. We offer you once again to pay your debt to that Vytrizvitel. Otherwise, we will turn our claim to the court and will take your belongings. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. So this is already going on for 1 year. He was drunk in May of 1971, and this warning is from June of 1972. This is interesting. This is the board of shame called Наши ветераны, our veterans. Of course, it's the kind of like a joke. It shows top 10 people that were taken to Vytrizvitel and how many times they went to Vytrizvitel and how much they end up paying. This covers the period between 1995 to 1998, so for 3 years. First place, Khachaturian Valery Borisovich. It's interesting, he has an Armenian last name. He went to Vytrizvitel 35 times, and he ended up paying fines of over 2,000 rubles. On the second place, another sounds like Armenian guy, Akopov. So that's maybe this board of shame came from Armenia. He went 18 times and paid 1,133 rubles. That's a lot of money. And number 3, Bobrikov, Evgeny Mikhailovich, that sounds like Russian guy. He went 13 times in 3 years and paid 1,000 rubles for those visits. And then it go below Zakharyan, another Armenian guy, so definitely from Armenia, 12 times, paid almost 1,000 rubles. Now remember, car was 9,000 rubles. 2,000 rubles, that's a lot of money. It's pretty much, if you make an average 150, 200 rubles a month, in 3 years, you spend your annual salary just for the services of Vytrizvitel. So people paid a lot of money, so that's interesting. Our veterans board of shame from Armenia. There's another example of the shame board. I believe it came from some movie, and it says here, «Позор пьянице и дебоширу гражданину Горбункову. So it's a shame to the drunkard and troublemaker citizen Горбунков. Here's another sad picture. Two women helping their breadwinner to make it home. So in this case, they're lucky that he didn't get caught by police and being delivered to Вытрезвитель. They're just helping him to get home. And I just recalled recently someone asked me a question on my channel. Why was this tradition of 3 people drinking a bottle of vodka? Because if you have less than 3 people, chances you're going to make it home are dropping drastically. You have at least 3 people for a half-liter bottle of vodka, you definitely could make it home. So that's a kind of safe precaution there. So as you see, a situation with excessive drinking, alcoholism was really bad in the Soviet Union, but had one peculiar positive side effect. Because so many young men were already hardcore alcoholics, the standards for the guys in the Soviet Union were so low. So just because you could be a pretty homely dude, but if you don't drink, it's already you like a prime candidate. Any girl wants to marry you. If you don't drink and you don't smoke on the top of it, like you are prince even without a white horse. And I described the situation in my video called Soviet Son-in-Law Test. I'll post the link below this video. Researching for this topic, because fortunately I never got into the drinking much, so I never visited such facilities. But there is a guy who shared his memories about working at such a Вытрезвитель. So he mentioned one time they brought a drunk person, and when they searched his pockets, they found pieces of meat, like raw meat, without bags or nothing, just meat stuck in his inside pockets. Turned out to be he was a cook at the local restaurant. So just that kind of flashback to my recent video about people stealing meat products at the meat packing factories. This guy worked at the restaurant and was stealing meat as well. Another his story was that they got a phone call. There is a dead body laying by the bus station. So that's winter time. They arrived there and said, no, he wasn't dead. He was just drunk. He fell, pissed himself, and he froze to the ground in his piss. So they had to use a pry bar to pop him off the eyes. So he only lost a couple of fingers, but he survived. Well, before I showed you that vintage video that I promised you from the Вытрезвитель in Kharkiv, Soviet Ukraine from 1930s, I have one question and I would like you to answer in comment section. Why do you think Soviet people were drinking so much? They had cheap housing, nothing to worry about there. They had 100% employment, nothing to worry about there. Why did they drink so much? Alright, well, now enjoy the video and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.
Sergey wrote a book based on diaries he made when he was first in the United States. And as I understand, this is just volume 1, right? That's correct. He's going to have multiple volumes coming out. Well, I said, well, since Sergey is kind enough to come up and speak with us, I bought the book. I said, I might as well read this. I read this in one sitting, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I just couldn't put it down. It was so fascinating because your writing is very compelling, for one. And his story is very interesting for two. It's really interesting. You know, we've lived here our whole lives. We don't have that perspective. It's just so interesting to hear someone else's perspective about what we take for granted. So I hope you really tune in and listen to what he has to say. It's a very interesting, very informed perspective. Sergey is not a historian. He's an electrical engineer by trade, but I find that he has a depth of understanding on history, economics, culture. So just a very observant fellow and a great storyteller. So let's